Hi everybody, Dean Litwin here again, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. This week, talking about breaking down the barriers to people volunteering with your organization. And I've touched on this in a few other videos that I'll link to with cards here and at the end. But I really wanted to get to the essentials, and this is featured in a few webinars that I do, including the Building the Road to Retention, which I'm doing for America's State Commissions this month in May, and all this information is also included in a free webinar on Jedi Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion that I'm doing with Visas Voices this week as well. So when those links to those archived webinars are available, I'll put those here, and also the registration links if you see these tips right when they air on May 14th. So when we're talking about barriers to volunteering, it's really identifying obstacles that prevent people in general, but especially historically excluded or marginalized peoples from volunteering, and to gain kind of a better understanding of people's access to volunteering in general in a way that maybe you haven't thought about but should. So I consider the barriers to volunteering being financial, and you'll see a little graph up here in a second, to be financial. So there's a cost incurred by being a volunteer, whether that's a direct out-of-pocket cost or just the general need for time and money and time to make money that is more important and a priority for people these days rather than spending free time volunteering. They may not have that much free time anymore because of economic pressures or pandemic impacts, ongoing pandemic impacts, and they just can't afford to volunteer one way or the other. Transportation is a part of it, technology is a part of it, and there's just no way that they can afford the volunteer opportunity to work with your agency. Then there's language, and this one should be more obvious. If you're primarily engaging volunteers that speak a certain language, especially English, then think about how you can do sincere outreach to neighborhoods, communities, other potential community partner organizations where people are speaking their native language. And it could differ depending on the demographics in your area, but if you're not offering anything in at least Spanish, because that's the second most spoken language in North America in the US, then consider doing ethnic media outreach, in-language newspapers, free radio ads, things like that. And I've talked about how to get free radio ads. So then there's the matter of access. So access on its own can be a pretty major barrier to folks volunteering with you. Either they don't have access because of the financial or transportation issue mentioned first, or they don't have access to get online. If that's the only place you're advertising and recruiting for new volunteers is on your website or Volunteer Match or Idealist or Craigslist or something like that. And you have to understand that that's not reaching a population of people who either don't know about those websites, and plenty of nonprofits don't understand that volunteer recruitment websites exist, including Points of Light has a platform that they call Engage, not to be confused with Engage Journal. But there just may not be access in the disabled sense as well, that they can't physically, with mobility impairments, get into the building, get into the work site. Are there ramps? Are there elevators? Is public transport accessible that gets to where they would be volunteering? If it's a remote volunteer opportunity, do you have any support system or reimbursement system for people who need internet or access to technology versus just being able to go to a library, more and more of which are closed? So there's online access, and there's in real life access, and there's access for deaf or blind or low vision people, even, again, depending on the accessibility of your website. If someone has the technology and they're online, then it doesn't matter if your website isn't accessible to them with either closed captioning on videos and trainings for deaf folks, or particularly websites for lower vision or blind people. That's an automatic barrier to them just not knowing about that role, even if that role can be accomplished by someone with deafness or blindness or mobility impairments. A lot of volunteer roles can be done by folks with different disabilities. So check your accessibility. And I'll put a link below to a pretty great standard for checking your websites and just overall accessibility, a few resources that I've been working on lately for that. Then there's awareness. Is there an awareness of the opportunity and the organization and the brand? And that gets into your agency's marketing and public relations. And you, as a leader of volunteers, you may have nothing to do with that. You may have a little bit to do with that specific to volunteer recruitment, but partner or learn about marketing yourself to help raise awareness of these opportunities. Because if people don't know that they can volunteer with your organization, like your website doesn't have anything about volunteering, if people go to your website or interact with your agency on social media, that's a big problem, is just lack of awareness. And then we get into kind of more recent barriers that have been really built up with additional bad layers of blocking people from volunteering in the last few years with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and other pandemics as they pop up. And that really is health. People are still concerned about their health overall, whether they've already had COVID, whether they're dealing with some other health issue. So being aware that folks are still trying to protect their health and the health of others. And if it doesn't feel safe physically or emotionally to work with your agency, then that's going to be a big barrier, and people aren't going to go where they don't feel welcome or feel safe. And that kind of shifts us over into the other barrier, which is people just have new priorities. A lot has changed in the last few years, and there's been more and more research coming out that the usual formal or traditional types of volunteering populations or labor workforce has been in decline, and there's a ton of factors. There's economic and, of course, pandemic factors to reducing the labor force overall, with deaths and disablement in the population and in the millions in most countries, that they have to work, they have to make money, or they have to do some sort of family care or elder care, child care. So that's happening as new priorities. So if you're putting a lot of energy into trying to get previous volunteers back, maybe shift that energy to new audiences and different populations, or take a look at how your roles can be done by more than just a specific demographic of volunteers that you're used to, like in a 9-to-5 workday at a hospital, for example. And then the last barrier to break through is trust, or specifically broken trust is its own kind of barrier. If a few years ago in early 2020, if your agency suddenly shut down all volunteer opportunities and or fired or furloughed or laid off the coordinator, the volunteer services staff that the volunteers all knew and trusted, that has broken trust. And I'm working with a lot of clients on building that back up the last few years. But trust is something that I think is really the currency of volunteer engagement or community engagement, and support for your mission is all built around relationships and building trust or repairing trust when it's broken. So take a really good, honest look at how volunteers are treated in your organization, how easily they can access and might be aware of opportunities with your organization. So check kind of all of the recruitment channels for accessibility, for brand awareness, work with IT or whoever's running your website to make sure that that is easy and volunteer information is accurate and right on the front home landing page. So there are several things you can do to help accommodate and break down these barriers to volunteering. So that might help solve some of the kind of chronic problems I'm hearing about. We don't have enough people, or we don't have enough people in certain roles or doing certain things. If that's the case, take a look at those roles and those schedules and see if you can add in any of my classic thinking about people's comfort, convenience, and connection to the cause. So it all kind of comes back down to the 3 C's, But take a look at what barriers you can remove so people can volunteer with you more easily, jump through less hoops, have little or no expense out of pocket. If you can possibly help cover volunteering expenses, that's going to make a big difference. I hope you enjoy these little 10-minute Tuesday tips every week. We'll be back next week with more. And in the meantime, please subscribe to this channel. If you're not yet part of the Cool Kids Club, please like this video and share it if you enjoyed it. And leave a comment below on how many of these barriers you might still have with your volunteer services with your organization and how many you want to work on. More resources and links in the description below. Take care. We'll see you next time.